know what he's talking about, and we would understand God's message. Now, in much the same way, every time God sent a messenger to people, it was in effect like he was sending us a letter. And for us as human beings, we have to accept all the letters that God has sent us and to use the information that he has given us. And in this way, the Quran, being the last of God's treatises, last compilation of knowledge to us, is known as the Last Testament. And in this last bundle of information, we are told that now this teaching to us has been completed, and that what we are being advised now is relevant to us right until the last day, and that anybody who holds firm to this teaching will have the best teaching possible. And if he builds a society, an empire on these teachings, it will be based on a solid foundation. If you build your life on it, it will be built on a solid foundation. What God teaches us in this book, his last testament, which confirms teachings that came in the past, is that God created Adam. And he informed Adam about the nature of things. And when Adam was made informed of this, he asked the angel and the jinn being another creation created from fire, just as the body of man was created from clay. He asked the jinn and the angels, we are informed, were created from light. They were asked to bow down before Adam. This was a figurative or a physical expression of the angels and the jinn that man was superior to them, and that God was informing them of this, and that they should recognize and acknowledge man's superiority. Nothing happens without God's knowledge and God's consent. And God was aware that Satan would rebel, and indeed he did. Satan refused to bow down. Satan was a very high jinn, a very superior jinn, of high ranking. He refused to bow down. He considered himself superior to man. And before God announced his punishment, Satan asked God for permission to have his punishment deferred until the last day. And he made a challenge that if given this opportunity, he will prove that he is superior to man, and he will make man bow down to him, just as he was asked to bow down to man. And God gave him his wish, allowed him this respite until the last day. So we know, we are forewarned that Satan is our avowed enemy. We are told to beware of him, to avoid him, to be careful of the way he will try to constantly attack us and constantly make us submit to him. Did God give us any advice with regards to the aspect of worship? Because remember, the worshipping of God is an integral part of who we are, and God alone is worthy of worship. And if Satan is going to get us to submit to him, he may try to get us to worship him instead of God, and he may try to do this by stealth, just as he did in the case of slavery. So did God give us any guidance to forewarn us and to prepare us and to protect us, to immunize us, so that we can be protected against Satan's attempt? Yes, he did. He gave us this information in the Quran. Now we are told in a tradition of Prophet Muhammad the following, and this was narrated by Abu Huraira radiallahu anhu. And this is reported in Sahih Muslim, which is a compilation of hadith, which is practices and activities of God's final prophet, may peace be upon him. And it states that the Prophet of Allah, peace be upon him, said, "There is for every apostle a prayer which is granted, and every prophet showed haste in his prayer. I have, however, reserved my prayer for the intercession of my ummah on the day of resurrection. And it would be granted, if Allah so willed, in case of everyone amongst my ummah, provided he dies without associating anything with Allah." So we have been warned, and we have been given glad tidings, that if we are capable of upholding this one aspect, that is associating nothing else with God as our object of worship, that God alone is our God, we can be given the good news that we would have help to assist us in qualifying for our place in paradise. What did God say in the Quran? It says the following. In Al-Quran, Surah Al-Tawbah, chapter 9, verse 31, referring to the practice of the earlier Jews and Christians, it says, "They," referring to the Jews and the Christians, "have taken as lords besides Allah, by obeying them in things which they made lawful or unlawful according to their own desires, without being ordered by Allah. Their rabbis and their monks and their Messiah, Mary's son, without being ordered by Allah, their rabbis and their monks and the Messiahs, Mary's son, when they were bidden to worship only one God. None has the right to be worshipped except Him, be He glorified, from all they ascribe as partners unto Him." Now Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, was reading this verse when one of his companions came by, and this is narrated by one of these companions, and also reported in Sahih al-Bukhari, a very authentic collection of hadith, that Adi bin Hatim said, "O Allah's Messenger, they do not worship them, saying that the rabbis and the Jews do not, that is, the Christians and the Jews do not worship their monks and their rabbis." Allah's Messenger, peace be upon him, said, "They certainly do. They," referring to the rabbis and the monks, "made legal things illegal and illegal things legal, and they," referring to the Jews and the Christians, "followed these rabbis and Jews when they did this, and in so doing they actually worship them." He was giving manifestation to the previous verse. Now we need to sit and look at this verse and study the essential message of this verse, because this verse is teaching us what it means to worship God. What is the essence of the worship of God? I'm going to state this in the beginning, that very often, to many of us, accepting God's teachings can be very difficult. And our mind is very smart at rationalizing our situation and creating excuses as to why we are going to reject God's teachings and why we will continue doing what we are doing. Very often when we are informed of some teaching of God and we immediately anticipate the difficulties that this will create for us, we immediately, instead of trying to address the difficulties and sorting the problem, we take an easy way out of rejecting the message. And this is what has happened when it has come to the case of the question of what is the worship of God. God, we are told, is one, the sole source of everything, the sole source of all law, and everything is governed by fixed principles, which we call laws. When these fixed principles apply